let's start here. The government in England asked me to do this. They said, Stephen, can you set up this action technology group for us to, well, you can read. And I said, yeah, I can do that. I can tell you what you need to do. So I spent a year, had a really good 15 people, working out what they should do. We wrote a report. As we wrote it, the ministers were all sacked. This happens a lot in politics, So we've now rewritten the report. It goes out in January. We've rewritten it for the children instead. And we're saying to them, hey, your kids, this is the policy you should have had. If you haven't got it, make a big noise until you get it. And I'm reasonably confident they will. That's not really the final cover of the book. But it raises that question for us about who do we go to make real change happen? And we're going to look at practical examples. Here are things I'm doing day by day that you can do too. And of course, it's very often kids. Look, this is really interesting. These are spaces from around the world, spaces of learning, spaces of working. If you look at the top two green ones there, the kids on the left-hand side in, I think that's New Line Academy, sitting on their tiered seat. That's probably the coolest, hottest startup space in Madrid at the moment. These days I'm a professor in Madrid. That's Sec Labs in Madrid. And look, it's the same as the kids' space. Come down to the row below. The bit on the left is a group of kids in Denmark. I rebuilt education around Silkeborg. The kids said, we're always in trouble for running in the corridors, so let's design that out. So they designed in a running lane. If you stand on the green bit, you have to run. It's compulsory. Teachers have to run. Visitors, I've got a picture of their Minister of Education, tubbier than me, sort of jogging round. And there on the right-hand side is another hot startup in Barcelona, down at the bottom. Telefonica there. Bunch of kids who've designed their own classroom there. If we come over to this side, slides. I'm intimately concerned with this one at the top here because I'm paid for it. And the one in the middle is Google. The one in the bottom comes out of a library in one of my schools in England. If you return a book and you can prove you read it, you get a token, you go down the slide. It's quite a good slide. So. Playfulness in learning, playfulness in working is everywhere. And where we are with learning, I thought I'd better give you a Venn diagram, this late stage. Training in companies has become learning. The media, your media, have gone crazy for learning. I turn on the telly over here, it's people learning to cook, learning to dance, learning to sing, learning to do everything, really. The whole damn mass media is learning about President Trump, I think, looking at my phone just now. Education has moved to learning. I've said 1,000 times, we're probably the death of education and the dawn of learning. And what does that look like? Well, complicated is the answer. If I go back to my first Mac, 1984, black and white screen, we had a 3-year national debate about whether the computer should have color or not. The mathematicians thought it'd be all a bit distracting, all that cyan could turn a young head, And Apple in those days, Apple were generously the sponsors of my first chair as a professor. I've been a professor a very, very long time. They signed up all these folk and we used to have parties. So we'd kind of rock up and who was there? Harrison Ford, Richard Dawkins over here, Douglas Adams, Bryan Adams, Lauren Bacall, Muhammad Ali. These are great parties, the Spice Girls used to crash the parties, I vaguely remember them as a bit of a fog, But they used to ask these folk, here's some cool technology, what might we do with it? They don't do that anymore. They give it to kids and say, show us how good you can be with it. It's cheaper than these guys in a party, I'll tell you. I thought I'd better give you an exponential graph, so here's one. And back in 1985, we had time to think about all this. You can list, you can read the things we could do. Now, pace of change is so great, you've barely got time to do a pilot. Who am I going to trust? Who am I going to share my outcomes with? So it's a very different world, and probably in summary, really, we're in a world, certainly in learning, of post-appropriation. The time to seize a technology and say, well, this is the right slide, or anybody here use a slide rule? Anybody old enough to be slow? My goodness, look at that. You can't be that old. That's not possible. Stole it from your granddad. Or you had to have the right calculator or the right... the minute phones appeared, I don't know a school anywhere who's got a class set of phones. This is individual technology and it's individual learning. And that was the watershed, really, that changed everything, I think, for us. So enough of all the faff. What does that start to look like when we start innovating with it? Well, I've had kids running around the world measuring their learning environments. We're in an Internet of Things world. We're in a world of big data. They want to know when their learning is optimal. They want to know when the temperature is too hot, CO2 is too high, the light levels are too low. So we built them a little device. The devices look like this. They're 3D printed. We made them about 2 years ago. It's been a big research project. If you're interested in this, go to learnometer.net. There's a little learnometers. To our surprise, we're being inundated by people in the corporate sector saying, actually, when we employ people, they're dull. We've got high employee churn. The smart ones leave quick. We're left with the dumb ones. What do we do about that? And I say, look, paint the walls, open the windows, get the lights up, turn it into a place of learning. And this is so cheap now. This was on my Twitter feed this morning, if you're following it. These are the part of my team. They've just built the printed circuit boards. I said, how's it going? They said, yeah, we finished them. And if you can read from there, can you see that from the back? Probably can now. We're getting 20 circuit boards with the fittings, with the components on them for $30. This is spectacularly cheap technology. But, we've been into 56 examination rooms in the last year, and I haven't been into a room that wasn't damaging the children's prospects. I've been into some rooms where the kids on the right-hand side will be doing 5% worse than the kids on the left-hand side. Same kids, same teachers, same exam, same school, dumb room. It's really, really interesting. So where do we get all this from? Well, we got it from sport. I hasten to mention these figures to you, but I'm going to. Back in Atlanta, Team GB, 1 gold medal, Vincent and Redgrave, 15 others, 36th overall. Rio this year, 27 gold medals, 2nd overall. And a component of that was learning. We've sat down, and this is what our athletes look like trackside these days. They're sitting there with a screen, they're sitting there with data, they're working out what works and what doesn't work. I couldn't tell you who's the coach and who's the athlete in that picture. I work with the elite coaches on doing learning for the elite athletes. And you start to realize we can do remarkable things. Here's a degree we've just set up. Setting up. It's a master's degree. It never ends. It's affordable. You pay $15 a month for the degree. That's all. It's like joining the gym. You belong to a community. The key features are monthly membership. You have some obligations. Everything's peer validated and peer assured. You collect badges. When you get enough badges, you've got a master's degree. If you get more, you've got an MPhil or whatever you fancy, really, but you never leave. And half the people who've signed up for it already have already got a master's or a doctorate. It's not the qualification they want. They want to be in a community of other people. They want to be in an argument at this level rather than this level. Or, nobody wants to do a PhD because you don't want to live in a cupboard for 3 years and lose all your relationships. So, sorry if you're doing one. When we said to them things like, when do you want to know that people are actively engaged in your research and are looking at your stuff? They said, all the time. We said, well, you might be busy. They said, well, we won't look. You don't have to make these decisions for us as learners. Bring on the data on our phones, our watches, our Google Glass. I got my Google Glass with me, actually. Just bring on the data. And ironically, when we said to them, how would you like to do your learning? They said, well, the last thing we want to do, these are learning professionals, the last thing we ever want to do is face-to-face. Oh, we know that doesn't work, But it's what you do every day. Yeah, well, that's why we want to do the degree, We'd like to move on. So these are real changes. Now, building a degree for 1 million teachers where they can do 10 years of research for $15 a month with no other fees is life-changing stuff. This is the end of university life as you know it, I think, and the beginning of proper research. I do not know another sector. I'm a professor in 3 universities. I don't know another business sector that only holds a party when its clients leave. It's completely bizarre behaviour. You finish a degree, they say, hurrah, bring in your mum, we'll have cheese and wine, we'll never see you again. It'll be, what a joy. Every other sector in the world hangs on to people. So let's design degrees that do just that. I'm building a free school for kids. It's a virtual free school. It has no buildings. I ran for 10 years that big Not School project. 10,000 kids, 1,000 kids a year who'd been excluded from school. And at the end of the 10 years, they outperformed the schools that had kicked them out. They learnt online. They learnt with others. They learnt in cohorts. We're just setting this up. The hardest thing about setting this school up is it doesn't match the government's form. They said if they're learning at home, there's more than 2 of them, we'll have to inspect the toilets. So we said, oh, no, they're not learning at home. They're just learning somewhere. Well, who knows? The courses at home in little clusters of 8 and 10, and they're learning botanic gardens and other places as well. So what I'm saying is you can do some fairly radical stuff. And perhaps what's happening here is maybe that world of learning that used to be driven by school leaders with a senior team, ministers above them, well, you can read. Maybe the whole thing's just inverted. Maybe we're now in the world where this is being led by radical teachers, imaginative children, parents who really want to be part of it, and they're creating their community's ambition, they're creating their community's vision, and smart senior leaders are going along with that and hanging on to the train as it goes, really. Or what does that look like? Well, it maybe looks like this. Here's a school I was in just 2 weeks ago. Umbrellas all hanging from the ceiling. The umbrellas are all full of rock wool. Why? Because it kills the sound in the classroom, makes it nice and quiet. Where did they get it from? Was it from government policy? Was it from the literature? I write a lot of academic papers. They're all in Spanish. Nobody reads them. I don't blame them. They're very boring. But you go to Pinterest. My Pinterest board is awash with great ideas about how to make learning better. And that's where the parents went, and that's where they borrowed. We can see the idea right up at the top there. And parents are properly engaged. When our government tried to change the model of governance at one of my schools to bring it in line with the rest of the world, my parents were out in the streets within a week. Save our school. Social media got them out there. Facebook got them together, and they won, of course, because they said there's 1,200 parents in the school, and look, we have 1,200 signatures. Politicians don't argue at that point. So this is exciting stuff, and I think we're here. I think this is in this kind of out of step moment when we used to be central controls roughly in line with what parents wanted, what companies were expecting, what the students want, and then something happened. The base started to accelerate. The bottom up started to hurtle away, and policymakers did not know what to do. Well, they hypothesized that maybe if they went for super, uber prescriptive, your guys suddenly deciding to start paying teachers by results, or ramping up the NAPLAN, or, the stuff that's going on. Let's get it really prescriptive, and then parents will come back to us. They will return to the fold, But actually, parents like what they saw. They like kids coming home from school saying, "Mum, you never guess what we're doing." You heard yesterday in the talk about quantum computing. You know, somebody said, but what about the young people? The young people love difficult problems. They love to be challenged and they love to be engaged. So what do policymakers do about that? Well, I think faced with a problem, they do this. I think what they should do is say, okay, let's build the experiments. Let's build the brave new worlds that really push the boundaries out. Let's really go for it. Let's see how good our kids can be. Not everywhere. Let's do it in a few places. And where might those places be? Well, last couple of thoughts, really. The places I'm working are very interesting. Look, here's a boring graph. You should see it. This is kids' performance in the PISA tests across the world. And you can see, I think, that Finland, our top nation, by a country mile. Look at them down here. They go, woohoo. They're cheering and jumping up and down and eating radioactive reindeer and all the other stuff they do in Finland. You know, it's a... but there's two axes on the graph. You can see what the other axis is. It's whether the kids are enjoying it or not and going to want to do science ever again. So kids in Finland are the least likely in the world to ever do science again. Over here, you know, what have we got? Mexico, Brazil. They don't know much science, but they've got a vigorous illegal chemical industry running, you know. So I mean, they've got an engagement going there, you know. And Finland didn't panic. What Finland did was they said, okay, let's just abolish all our subjects. So in Finland, the subjects have gone. Physics is gone, chemistry is gone. Finnish is Finnish, they told me. It's a Finnish joke, I laughed, you know. Doesn't get very funny above the Arctic Circle, I tell you. So who might you do that with? You know, where might you push out the boundaries, the frontiers? Well, listen, I'm doing stuff with refugees. I'm building makerspaces in the refugee camps in Jordan and in Syria, and I'm connecting up kids around the world to scan a model of some evil beetle you've just found scampering across the floor, send it to the other guys in Scotland. In Scotland, they'll scan one and send it back to you. There's no language because nobody speaks Syrian and nobody can understand Scottish. So, you know, there's a sort of a language wall between them. And then turn it into a robot and do something good with it and swap it on. And, you know, I'll leave you with this image from UCJC where we've taken a dozen refugees straight out of the camps and put them into university and got them started on their undergraduate program. And this lad here is taking a bow, who just stood up in front of everybody and said, you know, he said, I was in my camp, I was in my university for a day, I'd started my degree, I was very excited, and then they bombed it. And I climbed out over the bodies of my classmates, and I thought, well, that's it, we're done for this life, that's my lot. And yeah, this worked out. Here I am in Spain, doing a university course, and he spoke with such passion, I'm choked remembering it now. You can see a standing ovation from the great and good in Madrid, and he took a gentle bow. Those are the valuable people in this world, to get across the Mediterranean, to get to where he got to alive on his own with all the ingenuity and braveness of a kid, of a 19-year-old kid. These are the people you need to change your economy. These are the people you need to change your world. These are the people who will mend our world with learning. And they don't even have to come here because you've got the technology that allows them to do extraordinary things wherever they are in the world. My kids in the camp projects are learning to work on lines of longitude, lines of latitude, at a distance, remotely, across cultures, using STEM products. These kids are going to be worth way more money than your kids would have been without those collective, collaborative, problem-solving, collegiate skills. So if you want to mend the world, look for the bit of the world that needs mending. If you want to see progress, look to the 21 million children who are displaced and say, you know what, guys, your life's crap, we can make it so good. And we can learn from you as we do it. And we can save ourselves. Thank you.